Thanks for watching Matthew's Daniel Atlantic Weather Briefing. I'm meteorologist Gonzalo Agudelo. I have quite a bit to talk about today. Here in the Atlantic Basin, we have three active systems currently right now, two tropical depressions in the far western Atlantic right now, and a major hurricane in the central Atlantic, not going to be a threat to the U.S. We have a couple other areas of interest that we're going to be discussing as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and talk about Tropical Depression 8. Tropical Depression 8 currently located just southeast of the Outer Banks of North Carolina. You can see it right here pretty well on this visible satellite imagery. You can see the low-level area of circulation pretty well. Not too much convection going on. There is some convection on the western side right now. That happens to be the case because we have quite a bit of wind shear. You can kind of see all these cloud tops tracking to the north and northwest, and that's keeping a lot of the convection on the western side of the system right now and keeping the center kind of exposed. Now, as the system continues to track northwest closer, um, it might get a little bit more organized. It might be moving a little bit away from that shear, but the center of circulation is just going to be offshore, Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. But since we have a lot of this rain and showers and thunderstorms on the western side, although the center of circulation is still going to be offshore, the western side of the system is going to be on the far eastern side of North Carolina. So it's still going to be producing showers and thunderstorms, potentially some heavy rainfall in some areas, maybe some flash flooding as well. So we have to be careful for that. The system, though, is expected to continue tracking to the west. There's a trough of low pressure coming toward the area, and that's going to deflect the system, curve it to the north and northeast, and eventually accelerating into an area of low pressure, another extratropical low, and that's going to be getting absorbed into that. You can kind of see what the National Hurricane Center here has forecasted for the system: a track to the northwest, maybe strengthening to a minimal tropical storm, and then accelerating out to the northeast. So like we said, there's some tropical storm watches for much of the coastline of North Carolina, and that's something we're going to have to watch out for. Some gusty winds are going to be expected over that area. But in terms of significant development, not really expecting that from the system. It kind of just popped out of nowhere, to be honest. But that's one of the ones we're going to have to be watching. And then we also have Hurricane Gaston. Gaston is out in the open Atlantic right now. Let's take a look at Gaston in our satellite imagery right now. Gaston is actually a Category 3 cyclone currently with winds at about 100 knots. So that puts it at a Category 3 hurricane. It's a major hurricane, which makes it the first major hurricane of the season. It looks really, really good right now. You can see it on the satellite imagery. It peaked at about 105 or 110 knots, so a pretty moderate Category 3 cyclone. You can see Gaston pretty well here. It's not going to be a threat to any landmass. It was relatively close to Bermuda, though. National Hurricane Center has the system continuing to track to the east and northeast. It had been tracking to the northwest and is starting to recurve right now. It's kind of in its stationary phase before it is deflected to the northeast. It's going to stay a hurricane for a while, still going to be over some relatively favorable environments, and then it'll probably be transitioning to a post-tropical system relatively soon. We can take a look at our intensity guidance, and throughout the next few days you can expect still a hurricane to be in the central Atlantic, and then once we get into the long range, a lot of them are showing this kind of gradual weakening. So that'll be what Gaston will be. Currently winds are 100 knots, gusts to 120 knots. So yeah, pretty good system right now over in the open Atlantic. Like I said, not going to be a threat to anything. And then we also have Tropical Depression 9, which is the one that we're actually a little bit more concerned about we have been concerned about this. The system models have been really struggling with the system over the past week as it has been tracking from the main development region. The system was a West African wave that had tracked sometime last week, continued in a westward trajectory, and a lot of models were picking up on some intensification as it approached the Bahamas. That did not happen. The system had continuously been bombarded with vertical wind shear, but now the system is currently tracking west of Cuba into the extreme southeastern Gulf of Mexico, and we're actually seeing some healthy development with the system currently, and we'll take a look at that a little bit more closely with the satellite imagery right now. And so now that the daylight's coming up, you can see a little bit better. The system's tracking um, finally out of the Straits of Florida, away from Cuba. Uh, and the center of circulation is still a little bit displaced from the main convection area. The center of circulation somewhere around this area right here, and we see most of the convection has been left on the east side, and that had to do with a lot of the vertical wind shear that had been bombarding the system. But as we continue out into the next day or two, it's going to be moving to the west. And over in this region, this is where it's going to be a little bit more favorable with less wind shear over in this region. And that's where we could potentially see some more development with the system into a tropical storm, maybe weak hurricane. And that's something we're going to have to watch out for as we go into the next couple days. Taking a look at the official National Hurricane Center track, the system continues to the west-northwest over the next day and a half maybe, and then it's showing a nice little recurving to the northeast. Now the models are still kind of struggling on the scenario right now. As you can see, this is our track guidance showing several computer models, and most of them are showing recurving to the northeast along the panhandle of Florida or even into central Florida as well. But there are still some models that continue to show this system tracking to the west. Now, the consensus overall is the system will recurve to the northeast. The other question, though, too, is how strong will the system get before it makes landfall? And there is quite a bit of uncertainty as to that as well. Once we get towards the system getting near Florida, a lot of computer models has it potentially strengthening pretty modestly into a pretty strong tropical storm or Category 1 system prior to landfall. And once you get a pretty strong tropical storm, there's essentially not really much of a difference between that and a Category 1 hurricane. So we're expecting some pretty modest development as the system moves into a more favorable environment over the next day or two. And that's going to be essential. The way that the system develops over the next day or two will determine how it strengthens as it continues north and northeastward towards some of the coastline in Florida. So we're going to have to watch out for that for sure as we go along. But yeah, just wanted to show you this. This is a pretty nice satellite image of the system right now. It's starting to really expand. Lots of moisture in this area. So we'll keep an eye on that for you. Other than that, we have a couple other areas of low pressure kind of lingering about in the Gulf of Mexico. We have in the far northern and northwestern Gulf of Mexico, we have an upper level low pressure system just offshore southeast Texas right now. Now this area of low pressure is going to kind of meander to the southwest over the next day or two. I'm not expecting any significant development of the system, and the reason for that is because the system is within a large area of dry air. You can kind of see it right here with these darker colors. That continues to entrain into the system and inhibit a lot of developed thunderstorms. So this system probably will not become a tropical system. It's just going to be probably a rainmaker for a lot of the Texas, Louisiana coastline, and especially offshore the Gulf of Mexico, northwestern Gulf of Mexico. The next area that we need to be looking at as well, and a lot of models are hinting at this forming kind of soon, and you can kind of see in the last few images of this loop, you can kind of see this bright area that's coming off the coast of West Africa right now. This is expected to develop into a tropical system in the long range, probably in the next 5 days. Models are pretty in agreement about this forming as it continues to track westward through the eastern Atlantic. We're going to have to watch the system very closely and how it develops, because we're having a lot of high pressure continuing to build, the Bermuda High, and when you have a lot of this high pressure building throughout this area, it steers these kinds of systems continuously to the west over the long range. And that's what we have already seen with Tropical Depression 9. And like uh, I've said in previous podcasts, we're moving into September, which is the peak of the hurricane season. We're already in a pretty hyperactive period right now, so we got to really keep our eyes on these systems and watch how they progress throughout time. But that's it for now. We'll keep you posted on the latest. If you have any questions, please email us at weather@mattdan.com. Thanks. Stay tuned tomorrow. I'll give you another update on the Atlantic. Have a good one.